Have you ever looked up an opera performance on YouTube and thought that it was amazing and it would be fantastic to see that in real life? So have I. Hi, I'm Cassidy Cash. Now, I'm a Shakespeare writer, so I'm partial to the power of the stage, and I was looking up productions coming in 2018 of Shakespeare's plays, and I was surprised to discover that there is an opera company right here in Birmingham that will be performing Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet in March of next year. So I contacted their general director, Keith Wolfe, and he graciously agreed to sit down with me and share with you how you can get involved with opera right here in our city. Whether you're a seasoned opera veteran looking to get deeper connected with this community, or you're a parent with kids who want to take voice lessons, or they're interested in this art form and you're not sure where to start, or you would just like to hear more about how you can explore the culture of opera and the stage for the first time, then this interview is for you. Keith Wolfe shares a massive amount of tips and suggestions on the power of communication, the power of the stage, places that you can plug in and connect, and some great events going on in Birmingham this year that you can plug in with. So listen in as we talk with Keith Wolfe, General Director at Opera Birmingham. Thank you for meeting with me.
Very welcome.
I'm so excited to have you here to talk about Opera Birmingham. Keith's story from an opera singer to becoming the director at Opera Birmingham is an interesting path. Keith, please share a bit about what your journey has looked like.
So when I started undergrad, I was going to be a chorus teacher, and my degree is actually in music education and performance. So I started out, I've been a singer, as a kid all my life, and so I thought I wanted to be a chorus teacher. And about halfway through undergrad, I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia. The opera company back home had renovated their theater, and they were doing a big production of Turandot and looking for extra members for the chorus. And I thought they had posted an audition notice at school, and I said, sure, why not, make a little extra money. It sounds like fun. And I got in the chorus, and I got bit by the opera bug. It was the first time I've ever been in I'd done a few, I've done a lot of chorus things, like sacred music, chorus concert kind of things in high school and college. But this was the first time I've ever been on the stage in that kind of grand spectacle kind of setting. And I was at one point in the opera Turandot, the leading character Turandot is singing these riddles to the tenor who's trying to win her heart. And I was literally standing probably 10 feet from her and could just feel her sound resonating in my body. And I thought, oh my God, this is like the most amazing experience I've ever had. And so I started singing in the opera chorus, and I think I sang with them for about 7 years. I graduated college, taught middle school chorus for a couple of years, and was still singing with them. And my mentor, who I met in that first production, Darren, I talked with him and said, I think I might want to give this a try. So I auditioned for graduate school and went to the Maryland Opera Studio at the University of Maryland. And about halfway through that degree, had an epiphany that while I loved opera and loved the rehearsal process, I hated auditioning. And I think fortunately, because I did take a few years off between my undergraduate and graduate degree, I was a little bit older and was a little bit more self-aware and realized to have a successful career, I needed, a lot of things that, not that I wasn't willing to work on them, but I think I realized how far I was going to have to go in order to even try to be successful. And also realized that while I love performing, I don't know that I wanted to be on the road 10 months out of the year. I wanted a house, I wanted a family, and all of that. So I talked with Darren, my mentor, who I met in this first show, who I've known since I was 19 years old. and said, I think I'm going to finish my degree because, I started it. I want to do this for myself, but I think I'm just going to go back to Virginia and teach. He was a singer himself and was at that time making the transition into administration, and said, I think, you have a passion, you love opera, you clearly, enjoy doing this. I would love for you to come work for me. He asked me to come work for him in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Wow.
So in end of October 2000, I sang the tenor lead in the Elixir of Love, packed up my bags, and moved from Washington, D.C. to Shreveport, Louisiana.
Wow, there's a climate change.
Yeah, that was quite a change. I was only there for 9 months before he was hired by the Fort Worth Opera, and he brought me along with him. And I thought, okay, sure. I was still not quite sure exactly where my path was going to be. So I thought, I'll go to Fort Worth for a couple of years, figure out what I want to do. 14 years later, we were still there, and it was time for me. I'd kind of decided by then, I think this is what I want to do. And so I started applying for positions, and the position here at Opera Birmingham came up, and I think this was a good fit, and obviously so did the board of directors, because I've been here now. I'm starting my 3rd season. I moved here in January 2015, so I'm almost celebrating my 3rd 3-year anniversary here in Birmingham.
Excellent. Well, glad you're here in Birmingham. That is an amazing
path.
I
really enjoyed it. Birmingham reminds me a lot of home, both in just sort of the general look. With Fort Worth is flat and brown, and Virginia and Birmingham are neither. Which I like, and the community in general has just been very, welcome. I've just, enjoyed getting to know and learn more about Birmingham, and the company has also been wonderful. We've been able to do and try a lot of new things here, which has been a lot of fun.
Excellent. Well, I wondered if you could expound a little bit on why you believe exclusively offering traditional repertoire, even with heavyweights like Mozart and Puccini, is no longer enough to succeed in opera, that learning to innovate your approach to today's audience is a very necessary skill set.
Sure. I fell in love with opera on the traditional classics, but a lot of people have a negative view of what opera is, or think of what they think opera is. The stereotype of the fat lady singing came to be for a reason, and it's not really like that anymore, but a lot of people, that's what they think. So I do think it's important to find ways to break down those barriers, and one of the ways is exploring more contemporary works, partly because those works are usually in English, where most traditional operas are mostly in Italian, but in a foreign language, if not English or not Italian itself. And they're also, more theatrical in a modern sense. Mozart's great. He was a genius. And once you get used to the way, those kinds of operas are performed, they do have a dramatic intensity of their own, but it's not like watching a movie. Sure. It's definitely a more drawn out process. Whereas contemporary operas tend to be more cinematic in their approach, so it moves along at a pace that is more familiar to a contemporary audience. And people are used to, or people that are interested in the performing arts and interested in theater are usually more comfortable with something a little bit more modern. Theater has always been on the forefront of being innovative and being more open to exploring new subject matters. So by taking the opera out of a traditional opera house and opera setting and doing it in places that are more theatrical, kind of automatically makes you think you're not going to see a typical opera, so you may be willing to give it a chance.
Absolutely.
And I do think there's also an appeal for most contemporary operas. There's subject matters that people will already have some background knowledge of. There's a work I would love to do here based on the book and movie Dead Man Walking. Yeah. If we did Dead Man Walking and I said we were doing Dead Man Walking, you would already kind of know what the show is about.
Yeah.
Versus if I said we're going to do, I don't know, Carmen, while you may know some music from Carmen, you may not necessarily know what the story is about and what to expect. So I think both getting out of a traditional setting helps helps people not think they're going to see something very traditional, breaks down that barrier. Plus, most contemporary operas having a more contemporary subject matter just helps us approach communities in a way that we wouldn't be able to do with Mozart and Puccini and those classics.
Sure. Well, I guess that leads in then to the follow-on question, which is about, for someone that's not familiar with traditional repertoire, like Carmen, and maybe is not comfortable with the format of Mozart, is it still beneficial for them to show up at a performance of one of those to get that exposure?
I think it is. I mean, for us, those works that we're going to perform have stood the test of time. I mean, Mozart operas were written in the late 1700s, so they've been around for, if I do the math quickly, 250 plus years. And there's a reason, because while you may not know the story of Marriage of Figaro going into it, it does have a universality to it, and these pieces have been classics both because the music is very powerful as well as the story having a relatability to it. We also try to make sure we provide opportunities to help break down those barriers. So someone who may not know about opera in general or a specific opera, before all of our performances, we do a pre-show conversation. So you can learn about the background of the opera, so you're not going into it completely cold. We also do events throughout the year leading up to the opera. So we're doing Romeo and Juliet this season. A couple weeks ago, we did a preview event, where we had a dinner and a couple of artists sang. I gave a little background of the story. I mean, most people probably know enough about Romeo and Juliet in general that they're going to know the show. But in general, for something that may be new, there's an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about it, hear the music. One thing we also do that many people may not realize, because most operas are in a foreign language, we do projected super titles above the stage so that you can follow along with the action. So it's almost like watching a foreign film with captions on the bottom.
There, so you can follow along.
Yeah, and so that definitely helps. And really, we also have done that for our English productions, for some of the new productions, because most people are used to listening to music on the radio and translating that sound into words they understand. Singing operatically is a different technique that most people may not be familiar in listening to. So in order to help facilitate, even though we did last year a show called 3 Decembers that was in English, we did do projected titles so that people could really make sure they understood the story.
Okay.
So we try to provide opportunities to help lower those barriers. And then these days with YouTube and internet resources, if someone wanted to give it a try and come to see a show that they weren't familiar with, there are lots of resources to help prepare so that when you come into it, you may not feel as uncomfortable as you would otherwise.
That's excellent. What are some of the reasons that you believe opera is important to help address political and social issues?
I've always felt that the arts in general can hold up a mirror for us to see who we are as a society. I think there's of course a place for just fun and going to see Bohème because it's just a great love story and beautiful music. But I do think in more contemporary things, there is an opportunity for us to challenge our beliefs and what we may be facing in society. And that's another thing that I think I'm looking forward to expanding what we do here with more contemporary works, because it does give us a platform to engage a community in a way that we couldn't do with a traditional opera. So as an example, there's a piece we're looking at down in the future called Glory Denied, which is based on the true story of the longest serving American POW who was held for 9 years in Vietnam. It's a great opera. It's a powerful story. It's very moving. But that gives us an opportunity to work with partners we wouldn't be able to work with for Romeo and Juliet or Carmen, and use that as a springboard to do conversations outside of the performance to talk about what's happening with, in this instance, our veterans. And there are a lot of works, Dead Man Walking, has the opportunity for us to, while this show itself doesn't take a stand on the death penalty, it's about the relationship between the main characters. It definitely, lets you, or opens the door to examining that story. There are, there are stories about, race relations. There's all kinds of modern stories being written that I think the arts in general give us that opportunity to have the conversation. And I think, of course I'm biased to opera because it's what I do, but I think there's a power in what we do. Opera singers are not amplified. When you hear an opera singer, on the stage, there's no microphone. The sound that you hear, they are producing themselves. And so there's an immediacy to that really heightens emotion. And so I think opera does provide a unique opportunity to experience a story that, just on the screen as a regular play or movie doesn't necessarily have the same emotional impact sometimes.
True, and the conversation is such a powerful thing to get going, so that's
right.
Excellent.
Right.
With community partnerships with organizations like Birmingham Boys and Girls Choirs, as well as the Alabama School of Fine Arts, Opera Birmingham establishes their focus on introducing young artists to opera performance.
Mm-hmm.
I think many parents and even students, though, at first, and you talked to this a little bit before, but they are uncomfortable with that idea of singing not just loudly, but the whole device that you have to learn how to do to make the sounds that don't have to be amplified, as you mentioned,
right?
And in a foreign language. So could you share some of what you went through and learned on what it's like to get more comfortable with that art form?
Right. I think a lot of my views are definitely influenced by the fact that I started as a music teacher and not just as a performer. I've always felt that everyone can sing. Our voice is the only instrument that everybody has and is completely unique to us. And while not everybody may be interested or want to pursue the training to do operatic singing, there's something very powerful about singing in a chorus. Of having that communal experience of blending your voice with somebody else. So I think just studying voice in general is just a very powerful tool. And then I don't have any of the current research, but there have been studies that music study helps with school. Even just beyond just voice study, the discipline it requires to be in a chorus of some kind definitely helps in study skills and personal confidence and all of that kind of stuff. So I definitely encourage I wouldn't necessarily think if I were going to be talking to a parent that you should necessarily think of studying voice to be an opera singer. If that's where your path leads you, great. There's lots of opportunities there, but just studying voice in any way, is just such a great confidence booster. And again, it's something that I think everyone can do, and everyone can sing for fun, whether that's at karaoke or at a church choir or a community chorus or the opera chorus. So I would always encourage people to say, just to give it a try. And because anyone can sing. You don't have to have lessons like you have to have at a piano or a cello to make a song. Everybody could sing "Mary Had a Little Lamb" and get started. So I think it's the most unique instrument and the only instrument that everybody has and can enjoy.
Excellent. Well, I mean, for parents that are interested and maybe they come to Opera Birmingham and see a production, or their kids are asking questions about this, and the parents don't have this background, where are some places either with Opera Birmingham or in Birmingham for them to start to plug in and engage and kind of explore this?
Right. Well, I think, I mentioned some of the things that we do just to help introduce people to opera. So we do events throughout the year, preview events.
And those are not just shows. When you say you do events, these are community engagement.
Yes. So as I mentioned, we did this preview of Romeo and Juliet. So it was a dinner with some singers and and a background of the story and the composer. So we do those throughout the year to introduce the shows that we're specifically doing. So that's one opportunity to learn specifically around Opera Birmingham. And again, with the internet and YouTube and Wikipedia, there's a lot of information just available. And then, I'll give us a plug here, following us on social media, on Facebook. We're always posting things, not just about ourselves. I just read an article this morning about the highest note ever sung at the Metropolitan Opera, which is in a new piece they're doing right now that we'll probably post. So there's always just, general information about opera that we share as we find different resources. If someone had a student that was interested in opera in general, I would definitely encourage them to participate in their course at school, or a community program like the Birmingham Boys Choir or Children's Choir, just to explore that opportunity. And then as they get a little bit more mature, we have an opera chorus that is all made all of people who are here locally in Birmingham, especially college students and other professionals who have enjoyed music, but now they're doctors and lawyers and many other things. So as they get a little bit older, there is that opportunity. If they ever want to be on the stage, we have what we call supernumeraries or supers. They're basically like extras in a movie. Waiters, sword carriers, all different kinds of things. So there are usually other opportunities for someone who might want to be involved but doesn't necessarily sing or doesn't necessarily have that experience.
Okay.
So there are lots of different ways you can engage with opera in general and Opera Birmingham in specific, just to explore that as an idea.
For it. That's wonderful. Those are some great resources, and we'll definitely link to the social channels so they can have access to that.
Excellent.
Keith's first production with Opera Birmingham was Hamlet, done in 2015. What was the impetus for bringing Shakespeare back to the opera stage again this year with Romeo and Juliet? Have you found opera to be a successful medium for Shakespeare plays?
When we were planning this season, I love Romeo and Juliet, and it was something that was on my short list to consider for here. And I realized we haven't performed Romeo and Juliet in over 40 years. So it is, a great opportunity to bring it back. We also had a unique opportunity. We do a vocal competition in the spring every year. And at that time, the last two winners, since we've announced the show, the winner of this past competition as well. So it turns out to have the last three winners of the competition are playing leading roles in this opera. So while I knew other singers that I could have hired for this, it was a great opportunity to feature artists who we've helped promote. And it's something that I do feel very strongly about. It's great that they can win prize money. No singer is going to ever turn down winning a prize. And we have always brought them, or we've recently, in the last at least 10 years or so, brought them back for a featured recital in the fall. But I also want to, it's also important to help promote their careers by giving them opportunities to actually perform in the production. So it was kind of like a perfect lineup of an opportunity for a show that we haven't done in a long time, having a artist who, I wanted to help promote. And, it's just a great classic story with some really beautiful music. So it was a great fit. And I do think, Shakespeare does translate very well on the stage. I should have looked up the number, but there are at least dozens of operas based on Shakespeare's plays. I think there are at least a dozen operas based on Romeo and Juliet alone. This version is probably the most famous, but there are operas based on Macbeth, based on Othello. I saw one this past summer, Falstaff, which is based on a character from The Very Wise of Windsor. So there are lots of, Shakespeare is so dramatic and funny, depending upon which side you're going. And I think it just naturally translates, that composers have been naturally drawn to that as a subject matter.
To that format. Well, I have some questions that are not directly related to Opera Birmingham, but before I jump into those, is there anything else from your story or the upcoming season that you want to make sure we know?
Well, in addition to Romeo and Juliet, we have a small chamber opera in January, Tragedy of Carmen, which is the Carmen story many people may recognize music from, if not the story itself, that's been condensed into a 90-minute one-act version, focusing on the central characters. So I think, I would encourage, people to take a look at both of the productions, because, if you're brand new to opera, of course, Romeo and Juliet, it's a classic story. It's a great introduction, but for someone who thinks they may not like opera, Tragedy of Carmen is a very intense theatrical piece, and in a condensed format, which may be a little bit more accessible for someone who wants to give it a try.
Excellent. We'll put links where you guys can check out those and sign up for tickets and stuff like that in the show notes as well. My next question is, I want to ask you to think about the Shakespeare plays you've seen the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. What would you say are the 2 or 3 plays that immediately come to mind as having had the biggest impact on you?
So it's funny, the Shakespeare that I've seen in the last couple of years have all been operatic interpretations. I don't think I've seen a stage play in quite a while. But the ones that struck me, thinking of opera, the stereotype of opera being big and grand, Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet are both very intimate pieces. And so while they do have, both of them have big chorus scenes, grand parties, in both pieces, and I think especially even with Romeo and Juliet, they focus on the central story of, the two main characters. So Romeo and Juliet is a big grand opera. French opera traditionally has ballet, has all of these grandiose things, but at its heart, it's about Romeo and Juliet. And most of the show are their solo songs and duets. So while you have this big grand piece, it's a very intimate, powerful story. And I think that's what struck me both about those shows. And then this past summer, I saw Falstaff, and for that particular production, the cast was brilliant. They were hysterical. And you don't normally think of operas being funny, but there are a number of great comedies, and Falstaff is definitely one of them.
Definitely on the list. I can imagine. He's one of my favorite Shakespeare characters, so
right.
That has to be great. I believe that stage performances play a major role in contributing to more thoughtful conversations as a society, which you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some of your tips for people that are looking to explore that broader conversation through opera, especially people for the first time? And I think we've hit on this a couple of times, so maybe.
Sure, but I can expand on that a little bit. We all spend so much time on our computers these days, or on our cell phones and social media. I even do this. I'll go out to dinner, and we'll chat for a little bit, but inevitably we end up looking at Facebook, and we're not engaging with each other. And what I think, opera and theater in general, it gives us a chance to connect with other people. It's a communal experience in a way that you don't get binge watching Netflix, or in some ways even going to a movie, because you're sharing the experience with everyone in the audience, but there's nobody on stage reacting to what you're doing. And so I think theater in general gives you that experience that you can't get anywhere else. And I feel this myself in a way, in a time when we are naturally polarized. Well, I won't say naturally, but so polarized. Coming together to have a communal experience, is definitely something different. And then, with more contemporary pieces, it does give us that opportunity to have a conversation, and explore things that we may not, experience in our everyday lives. So I do think theater in general, art in general, and opera specifically does give us unique opportunities to come together in a way that we don't get to do very often anymore.
I agree, and you've said that beautifully. So what is next for you guys? You've talked about Carmen, you've talked about Romeo and Juliet, but what are you and your team working on now that you're excited about?
So beyond those regular productions, we are looking ahead to doing some new works. Glory Denied is very high on our list. It's a great show, but does provide some unique opportunities. But we're also looking to expand how we, get out of the opera house and go out into the community. So we're looking to develop a family opera program in the spring, probably starting small, partnering with a couple of libraries to do some family shows, shorter length, meant to be engaged by children as well as adults. So that's a new project that we're looking to expand. Hopefully in April, we'll be able to do a couple of events. So definitely follow us on Facebook, and so we can share more information. And just the other thing that we do, I think I forgot to mention this in one of your earlier questions, but another thing that we do that is a lot of fun for someone who doesn't feel comfortable investing in, a grand opera, which is generally a couple of hours long in a foreign language, all those things. We do a program called Opera Shots, where we, basically it's basically a pop-up concert where we take over a bar or some other place. And it's kind of like going to a jazz club, but you hear opera and musical theater. And we just did one last week at the Collins Bar downtown. My corny joke Opera Shots is a great way to give opera a shot and have a shot if you're of
Yeah.
legal drinking age. That's not necessarily family appropriate, which is why we are looking at exploring some other, types of programming. But for someone who, thinks they might want to come see an opera, but, again, isn't quite ready to make the leap into, the full-blown experience, we do a couple of other things that are great opportunities for someone to give it a try and just come out and have a good time. And it's also designed to be kind of come and go, so you can come see some of it. And as we enter the holidays and everybody's got something going on, you can come by and have a drink and hear some music, and then go on and do other things. So I think those are a couple of things that we have coming up and that we're working on that I'm excited about.
That's wonderful. Well, I know I am so excited about what you've shared with us coming from Opera Birmingham. We will share links to all of this in the show notes of this video for you guys to connect. Keith Wolfe, General Director at Opera Birmingham, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, this was fun. Thank you so much.